He didn't just underestimate me. He was stupid enough to forget I wrote the very security protocols he's currently violating. They always forget. They forget the wife at home was the wolf guarding the henhouse he's tearing apart, and they never, ever remember that old keys are rarely deactivated completely. My name is Sloane. I am 36 years old, and my life is a masterpiece of modern architecture and silent compromises. I was on my hands and knees on the polished concrete floor, collecting the magnetic wooden blocks my 5-year-old son, Leo, had abandoned. Each piece clicked softly as I nested it into the pine box. Our house in Cherry Creek, a multi-million-dollar structure of glass and steel, demanded this kind of precision. It did not tolerate clutter. It was a house built for a magazine spread, not for a small boy who liked to build forts, or for a woman who felt like she was suffocating in the clean, conditioned air. The heavy front door opened, the sound echoing in the cavernous, open-plan living room. 10:30 p.m. Late, even for him. Marcus, my 41-year-old husband, stepped in. His suit jacket was slung over his shoulder, his tie already loosened. Marcus, the CEO of Aurelian Dynamics, a private strategy firm so exclusive its reputation was built on whispers and brutal efficiency. He looked impressive, as always, but he brought a chill with him, and a smell. It was not his cologne. It was floral and musky, a scent that clung to the wool of his suit. It was the smell of a long, close embrace. He dropped his briefcase by the door, a heavy thud on the expensive floor. Jesus, Sloane, can we not have a minefield of toys every night? I stood up, the wooden box in my hands. He was playing. It's clean now. It's never clean. He walked past me, heading for the kitchen, for the whiskey. He didn't kiss me. He didn't look at me. I followed, my bare feet cold on the floor. Rough day. They're all rough days. He poured 2 fingers of scotch. Did you take care of that charge on the Amex? My stomach tightened. The one from the gallery? Yes, I told you. It was for a charity auction. A $1,000 donation for a painting a kid could have made. He swirled the glass, his back to me. We're trying to build Sloane, not throw money away on your whims. A hot, familiar anger rose in my throat. It was a donation, Marcus, for the children's hospital, and it's hardly a whim when you just spent $10,000 on a new set of golf clubs. He turned, and his eyes were flat, dead. That was business. That was entertaining a client. Something you wouldn't understand anymore. He gestured around the vast, empty kitchen. You've gone soft. Staying here, you've forgotten what real work is. The injustice of it, the sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy, made me shake. Forgotten Marcus. I was your head of compliance. I built the entire firewall for Aurelian's IP. I worked 80-hour weeks right alongside you until we decided that I would stay home with Leo because you said you needed a stable foundation. He laughed, a short, barking sound that held no humor. Compliance, he scoffed, taking a step closer. The strange perfume wafted from him, choking me. That was a lifetime ago. You're a stay-at-home mom now, Sloane. You arrange playdates and pick up toys. Let's be honest. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, cruel whisper that was meant to shatter me. You're nothing without me. I waited for the tears. I waited for the shaking, the pleading, the familiar script where I would cry and he would apologize, or perhaps not apologize, and we would go to bed angry. But nothing happened. There were no tears. It was as if his words had struck a match, and instead of a fire, they had created a vacuum, a cold, hard, perfect vacuum. In that second, I saw him. Not as my husband, not as Leo's father, but as a problem, a system with a flaw. You're right, I said, my voice perfectly even. I'm going to check on Leo. He seemed disappointed by my lack of reaction. He shrugged and finished his drink. I went upstairs. I looked in on Leo, his small body a warm lump under the duvet, his breathing soft and steady. I watched him for a long time. I waited until 2 a.m. Marcus was a heavy, noisy sleeper. He was snoring beside me, oblivious, radiating whiskey and that other woman's scent. I slipped out of bed, quiet as a shadow. I went not to the kitchen for water, or to the living room to pace. I went to the home office. The room was mine, technically, though it had become a storage space for his old awards and our tax documents. In the back of the closet, under a box of Leo's outgrown baby clothes, was my old career box. It was filled with dusty accolades and performance reviews. I didn't care about those. My fingers brushed against a small, plastic laminated card and a thin, metal ring. I pulled them out, my old Aurelian Dynamics security badge. My face, younger and hungrier, stared up at me, and attached to the ring, a set of physical keys. Keys to the executive wing, keys to the file room, keys I had been told to just hang on to during my maternity leave, which had then become permanent. They were useless. Of course, deactivated years ago. Except, I froze. A stray comment from Marcus, just last week. He had been complaining over dinner, angry at his IT department. "That security upgrade is a nightmare," he'd grumbled. "They've pushed the final system migration again. Budget cuts. We're still running on the old server backbone." I looked at the badge in my hand. They hadn't migrated the system. They hadn't completed the upgrade. I wondered, standing in the dark of my $1 million cage, just how lazy his IT department had been. I wondered if they had only deactivated my email, my paycheck, my name. I wondered if they had forgotten to deactivate the wolf. I didn't just wait. I planned. Tuesday, 2 a.m., the deep, dead part of the week when the city's financial heart stopped beating, and the only people in the skyscrapers were the cleaning crews, and they were always gone by 1. Marcus was asleep, a dead weight in our bed, his breathing heavy. I had dressed in the guest bathroom, choosing my old clothes. Black trousers, a black silk blouse, and the low-heeled pumps I used to wear, the ones that meant business. I hadn't put them on in 5 years. I slipped out of the house, the click of the door sounding like a gunshot in the suburban silence. I took my car, the big, luxurious SUV that screamed Cherry Creek Mom. Tonight, it felt like a ghost, silent and dark as I cruised down the empty streets toward downtown. My heart wasn't pounding, not yet. It was a cold, steady drumbeat, low in my chest. The Aurelian Dynamics building was a black glass monolith, 30 stories of power. I turned onto the ramp for the executive parking garage, a privilege reserved for the top 5% of the company, a place I had been banned from for half a decade. I stopped at the yellow security arm. The reader glowed a dull red. I pulled out the badge. My old, smiling face looked laminated and naive. My hands were perfectly steady as I held the card up to the sensor. Nothing. A long, agonizing second. The system was thinking, searching through layers of forgotten code. I could feel the cold vacuum from the other night returning, the icy void of failure. He was right. I was nothing. Beep. The sound was sharp, electric, and utterly beautiful. The light on the panel flashed from red to a brilliant, welcoming green. The security arm groaned and lifted, inviting me in. I drove into the darkness of the garage, parking in an unmarked spot far from the elevators. I sat there for a full minute, letting the twist sink in. They hadn't just been lazy. They had been catastrophically incompetent. They hadn't revoked my clearance. They hadn't deleted my profile from the security mainframe. They had just disabled my email access and my payroll stub. My high-level, all-access, head of compliance administrative rights were still active. I was, in the system's digital mind, still one of them. I got out of the car. The click of my heels on the concrete was the only sound. It was a sound I remembered. It was the sound of my old life. I walked to the executive elevator bank. I swiped my card. The doors opened instantly. Inside, the air was different, familiar. The faint metallic smell of the air conditioning, the chemical scent of industrial-grade carpet cleaner, and under it all, the pervasive, stale odor of old coffee and ambition. I rode up to the 30th floor, the CEO's floor, my floor. The elevator opened onto a dark, vast ocean of cubicles, with the executive offices ringing the perimeter like dark pearls. I walked through the gloom, my steps now muffled by the thick pile carpet. I knew this layout. I had helped design the security protocols for it. I reached the corner. The double wooden doors with the simple silver plaque Marcus. I didn't need my card here. I pulled out the small metal ring, the physical keys. I chose the second one from the left. I slipped it into the lock. It felt heavy, resistant, a mechanical lock, not tied to the main system. He'd insisted on it, for extra privacy. I had argued against it at the time, citing it as a fire code violation. He'd overruled me. The irony was delicious. I turned the key. The click of the tumblers was deafening. I froze, listening. Nothing. No silent alarm. No call to a security desk. Just as I knew there wouldn't be. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, closing it gently behind me. His office was immaculate, minimalist, and cold, just like our house. The massive glass wall overlooked the Denver skyline, a glittering tapestry of lights that he claimed to own. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I pulled out my phone, the flashlight beam cutting a sharp, white line through the darkness. I panned the beam across his desk. Clean. A leather blotter, a silver pen set, a framed photo of me and Leo. I felt a surge of nausea and pushed it away. But something was wrong. The air was still. Too still. But I could smell it. Faint, but identical. The musky, floral perfume from his suit. She had been here. My light scanned the credenza behind his desk, a row of whiskey decanters, and behind a stack of bound financial reports, tucked away, was a second champagne flute. It wasn't clean. A faint, pale pink lipstick stain marked the rim. He hadn't even bothered to hide it properly. He was arrogant. He was sloppy. I moved to his desk, pulling the handle of the top left drawer. Locked. Of course. I used the smallest key on the ring, the one for the desk and filing cabinets. It opened with a soft snick. Inside, the usual CEO clutter, expensive pens, business cards, a box of cigars, and tucked in the back, a small square box of dark blue velvet. My heart was beating now, a fast, hot rhythm in my throat. This wasn't for me. Our anniversary had passed 2 months ago. My birthday was in January. I opened it. It was empty, but the silk lining was impressed with the shape of what it had held. A necklace, and not just any necklace. The embossed logo on the inside of the lid was from a jeweler so exclusive, so obscenely expensive, that a purchase there was not a gift. It was a statement. This was not a thank you for a good time. This was a down payment. I closed the box. I put it back exactly as I had found it. I locked the drawer. I stood in the center of his office, in the dark, the city lights painting patterns on the floor. This wasn't a search for proof of an affair anymore. I had that. This was different. This was trespassing. This was a violation of half a dozen laws I had once been paid to enforce. This was a criminal act. And as I stood there, breathing in the smell of his betrayal and her perfume, I realized I wasn't scared. I wasn't heartbroken. I was thrilled. I stood in the dark, my pulse a steady, measured beat. I knew the building's vulnerabilities because I had written the reports on them. The security cameras, as Marcus had insisted, were focused on ingress and egress, the elevators, the garage, the main lobby. They were for catching outsiders. He had rejected my proposal to install coverage in the individual executive hallways, calling it a breach of trust and bad for morale. He didn't want the partners to feel spied on. I looked at his desktop computer. The screen was black, sleeping. I tapped the mouse. A login screen glowed to life. demanding a password I didn't have. He had changed it from the one I knew, the one he always used, sometime after I left. A flicker of new, post-Sloan security. How touching. But it didn't matter. I wasn't a hacker. I was a compliance officer. I didn't need to break down the front door. I backed out of his office, the heavy door closing with a soundless whoosh on its expensive hydraulic hinges. I relocked the physical lock. I left no trace. I walked 20 feet down the dark, carpeted hall to the open plan area, the sea of workstations where the junior analysts and associates were ground into dust. I found an empty hot desk, a generic terminal for visitors or overworked floaters. I sat down in the cheap ergonomic chair. The monitor hummed to life, showing the same Aurelian login screen. I took a breath. My fingers, steady, moved over the keyboard. Username Sloan, Hendricks. My maiden name. The name on my compliance certifications. Password, a 24-character alphanumeric string that included my wedding anniversary, the kill code for our first firewall project, and the name of the dog I'd had in law school, backward. I pressed enter. I expected the account disabled or user not recognized error. I expected to be shut out, a ghost tapping on shatterproof glass. Instead, the screen flickered. The Aurelian Dynamics intranet homepage loaded. A cheerful welcomes graphic for a new hire orientation I didn't recognize flashed in the corner. I was in. A cold, sharp thrill, more potent than the one in his office, shot straight up my spine. The twist was even sicker than I'd imagined. They hadn't deleted me. They had just demoted me. My administrative access was gone, but my base-level account, the one tied to my employee ID, was still active in the server's memory. It was a read-only access, a ghost account. I remembered the memo. I had personally written a memo 4 years ago, warning our then CTO about this exact security flaw. I'd argued that terminated employee accounts needed to be scrubbed, not just disabled. The CTO, a friend of Marcus's, had said it was an acceptable risk and not in the budget. Oh, Marcus. You never, ever listen. I couldn't read his email. That server was firewalled by user, but I didn't need to. I had something better. I opened the company directory, and I opened the Concur expense portal. I didn't have a name for her yet. The perfume, the lipstick, the empty jewelry box. I needed a name. The money would give me the name. I went to the expense portal. My old compliance level access was, ridiculously, still intact. I could view the reports of anyone in the C-suite. I typed in his name, Marcus Thorne. I set the date range. The last 6 months. A list populated. Dozens of submissions. Golf at the Broadmoor. Client lunches at the Capitol Grill. Flights to New York. All standard CEO procedure. I started clicking. I wasn't looking for the big numbers. I was looking for the pattern. I found it. A dinner. Vetro. A tiny, absurdly expensive northern Italian place. I knew it. He had refused to take me there, claiming it was overpriced. Date 5 months ago. Amount $812. Expense, type client entertainment. Attendees. 2. Guest name K. Ryland. I clicked the next report. 2 weeks later. Mizuna. Another restaurant famous for its romantic atmosphere and its $400 tasting menu. Expense, type client entertainment. Attendees. 2. Guest name K. Ryland. I clicked again. And again. And again. For 5 months. A steady, unbroken chain of client entertainment. K. Ryland was the most entertained client in Aurelian history. My hands were moving on their own now. A decade of procedural muscle memory taking over. I switched back to the company directory. I typed in the name. Ryland. One result flashed on the screen. Name Kira Ryland. Title Strategy Analyst. Start date 5 months ago. I clicked on her name. The internal HR profile opened. It was a shell, a digital void. There was no About Me section, no uploaded resume, no education history from a proud alma mater. And in a company of ambitious type A narcissists who all used professionally lit headshots, her profile picture was the default, anonymous, gray and white system silhouette. Kira Ryland didn't exist, except as a name on a payroll and as a guest on my husband's expense reports. This wasn't just an affair with a junior staffer. This was a ghost he had hired, a ghost he was funding with company money. I was no longer a betrayed wife, sitting in the dark. I was the head of compliance, and I had just found a critical, systemic vulnerability. I was home before 4 a.m., sliding into our cold bed as if I had just gone downstairs for water. Marcus snored, oblivious. I did not sleep. I lay awake, my mind cataloging data, running queries. The ghost in the system, K. Ryland. The next day, I was the perfect suburban mother. I made Leo pancakes, cut into the shape of dinosaurs. I drove the SUV to his preschool. I smiled and waved at the other mothers. Their yoga mats rolled neatly in the passenger seats of their identical cars. They saw Sloane, the stay-at-home mom. They had no idea I was, at that moment, running a full-scale internal investigation from my iPhone. As soon as I was home, I went to my office, not the one downtown, but the sterile, glass-walled room where I paid our bills. I sat down at the desk, but I was no longer Sloane. I was the head of compliance. My target, Kira Ryland. The internal directory was a dead end. No photo, no history. A shell. But the expense reports had given me her start date 5 months ago. I started externally. LinkedIn. I found her. The profile was almost as barren as the internal one. Kira Ryland. Strategy analyst at Aurelian Dynamics. It was created 6 months ago, just before she was hired. No previous job history, no college, just a handful of connections, mostly low-level Aurelian employees, and a profile picture. It was blurry, low resolution, as if it had been screenshotted and re-uploaded. The woman was pretty, dark-haired, but the image was nondescript. It was designed to be overlooked. I, however, was paid to not overlook things. I right-clicked. I saved the image. I ran a reverse image search. The first pass gave me nothing. Stock photos, similar faces on other generic profiles. I narrowed the parameters, using the advanced search tools I used to use to vet international clients, cross-referencing for facial recognition matches against databases of public figures. A hit. It was not a match for Kira Ryland. It was a link to an article from the Financial Times, dated 2 years ago. The article was a deep-dive exposé on a high-profile hedge fund's fraudulent valuation practices. The byline was a name I knew. Everyone in my old world knew it. Adriana Pace. The photo in the article was crisp and professional. It was her, unmistakably. The same eyes, the same jawline as the blurry LinkedIn photo. Adriana Pace, one of the most feared investigative journalists in New York. A woman who specialized in taking down corporate titans. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a problem. This was a 5-alarm corporate fire. I looked at the blurry photo from LinkedIn again. It was a cropped, intentionally degraded version of the Financial Times headshot. My husband wasn't just having an affair with a junior analyst. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was being played. He was being mined. He was the star source for an undercover investigation into his own company. My mind raced, recalibrating the entire situation. The perfume, the champagne flute, the expensive necklace. This wasn't a romantic fling. This was a journalistic technique. Adriana Pace was using the oldest, simplest, and most effective tool in the intelligence gathering handbook. She was cultivating an asset. And Marcus, blinded by arrogance and flattered by the attention of a junior employee, was lapping it up. I opened the Concur expense portal again, this time on my secure laptop. I had the name. Now I needed the scope. I looked past the dinners. I looked for travel. I found it. 3 months ago. Client conference. 4 Seasons. Vail. Expense, $7,400. Attendees, Marcus Thorne, K. Ryland, this was not a conference. This was a luxury weekend. I found another one, 6 weeks ago. Strategic retreat, Amangiri, Utah. Expense, $12,000. This was a resort so remote and exclusive it was practically a fortress. A perfect place to talk, unobserved. Marcus, my brilliant CEO husband, was not only handing over company secrets to a journalist, he was using company money to do it. He was funding his own execution. This was no longer about a broken marriage. That was small, pathetic. This was about securities fraud. This was about shareholder lawsuits. This was about massive company ending, prison time level violations. And Sloane, the nothing he'd left behind, was the only person who knew. I had to become the wife he thought I was, the soft one, the one who had forgotten what real work was. That night, when Marcus came home, I didn't meet him with silence. I met him at the door with a smile. I took his briefcase. I had a glass of his favorite whiskey waiting for him. "You're home early," I said, my voice warm. It was 9 p.m., not early at all. He grunted, surprised by the reception. He let me take his jacket. The foreign perfume was still there, fainter now, but it no longer bothered me. It smelled like evidence. "Long day," he muttered, sinking onto one of the obscenely expensive bar stools in our kitchen. "You look so tense," I cooed, walking behind him. I put my hands on his shoulders, my fingers digging into the tight muscles of his traps. He flinched, unaccustomed to the contact. "You're carrying the weight of the world, aren't you?" "Something like that," he said, taking a sip of the whiskey. "Why don't you go take a hot shower?" I suggested, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A really long one. And when you come out, I'll give you a proper massage, the kind I used to." He looked at me over his shoulder, a flicker of interest in his dull eyes. He was so predictable. He saw a pliant wife, a domestic comfort. He didn't see the compliance officer setting a trap. "Yeah," he said, standing up. "Yeah, that sounds good." I watched him walk up the floating glass staircase. I waited until I heard the thud of his shoes hitting the floor above, and then the hiss of the shower starting in our massive, marble-tiled bathroom. I was already moving. His phone was on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger. I picked it up. My fingers were steady. The passcode. I knew he hadn't changed this either. Why would he? I was just the stay-at-home mom. I typed in the 6 digits. Leo's birthday, 052118, May 21st, 2018. The screen unlocked. I went straight to his texts. I ignored the messages from his CFO, the endless group chats with other CEOs. I scrolled down. There she was. Kira. No last name, no emoji, just Kira. I opened the thread. My heart didn't pound. It simply switched into a different gear. This was data acquisition. The top messages were what I expected. Flirtatious, cloying. Kira. "You were amazing in that meeting, Marcus. Only because I knew you were watching." I scrolled past the vomit-inducing compliments. I scrolled back days, weeks. I was looking for the pivot. I found it. It started subtly. "Kira, I was reading up on the Scion deal. It's just so brilliant. I don't get how you're structuring the financing. Marcus. It's complicated. Too complex for an analyst." Kira. "Oh, I know. I'm just a junior analyst, right. But I want to learn. From you." The ego-stroking was masterful. Adriana Pace was a professional. She knew exactly which buttons to press. I scrolled further. "Kira, I'm still confused about one part. How are you keeping the Silverleaf acquisition so quiet? The press would be all over it." My breath hitched. Project Scion was the internal code name. But Silverleaf, that was a name I hadn't heard. Marcus's reply was a long, boasting paragraph. He was showing off for the girl, the way a peacock flashes its feathers. Marcus. Because no one knows they're the target. They think we're aiming for West Trek. All the financial markers are pointing there. I leaked those markers myself. But the real prize is Silverleaf. We're acquiring their entire patent library, not their assets. By the time the market figures it out, we'll have absorbed them completely. I stopped breathing. Silverleaf was a publicly traded tech company. This was not just confidential information. This was material, non-public information. This was the definition of insider trading, and he had just confirmed the entire hostile takeover strategy in a text message to an unsecured party. He had just committed a felony. I kept scrolling. It got worse. He sent her details on timelines. He sent her internal valuation numbers. He was trying to impress her. He was trying to get laid. And in doing so, he was handing her Aurelian dynamics on a silver platter, all wrapped up with an SEC violation bow. I put his phone down on the counter. I picked up my own. I opened my camera. I photographed everything, every message, every date, every timestamp, the entire damning history of his arrogance and his stupidity. I carefully scrolled back to the top, so he wouldn't see that I'd read his messages. I wiped my fingerprints off my phone, and then off his. I plugged his phone back into the charger, placing it exactly as I had found it. I stood in the silent, $1,000,000 kitchen. The shower upstairs was still running. I had him. I had the proof. I could call a divorce lawyer in the morning. I could take him for the house, the cars, the alimony. I could ruin him for adultery. But how boring. How utterly, pathetically domestic. Ruin him for cheating. That's what a wife did. But I wasn't just a wife. I was the head of compliance, ruining him for securities fraud, for gross negligence, for catastrophic violations of the very compliance protocols I had written. Now, that was interesting. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, for the first time in what felt like a decade. Why choose one? Why give him the simple, clean death of a divorce? I wanted both. I wanted to destroy his life. And then, I wanted to take his job. I walked upstairs, my hips swaying, and the smell of jasmine-scented massage oil on my hands. The second trip was different. The first had been a reconnaissance, fueled by a cold, sharp spike of adrenaline. This one was an insertion, a clean, calculated military maneuver. It was 1 a.m. on a Thursday. I didn't bother with the stealthy black clothes. I wore jeans and a sweater. I wasn't a trespasser anymore. I was an auditor. In my handbag, nestled in its velvet box, was the gift. I had spent $2,000 on it yesterday, in cash, from a specialty electronics store downtown. On the outside, it was a sterling silver fountain pen, heavy, perfectly balanced, a brand he coveted but had never bought for himself. It was the ultimate CEO status symbol. On the inside, it was a weapon. The pen's internal mechanism had been professionally and expensively replaced. It still held a small ink cartridge it would even write, but the rest of the casing was a battery and a highly sophisticated voice-activated recorder, the kind security firms use for corporate espionage. It had a 72-hour battery life and a 30-foot audio radius. I moved through the empty building like I owned it. The card beeped. The elevator chimed. The physical key turned in his private lock. I stood in his dark office, the city lights glittering below. I didn't use my phone's flashlight. I knew where everything was. I walked to his desk. I opened the velvet box. I took out the heavy silver pen. It felt cold, surgical. I looked at the desk, his leather-bound blotter, his laptop, dark, and his ceramic pen cup, holding a collection of cheap Bics and a single branded Aurelian ballpoint. I picked up the pen cup. I dropped the silver fountain pen inside, alongside the others. It stood out, gleaming in the moonlight, precisely as it was supposed to. An offering, a trophy. It was placed right in his line of sight. I was back in my own bed by 3 a.m. The next morning, I waited until he was knotting his tie, already checking his phone, his mind clearly somewhere else downtown, perhaps with Kira. I held the small, empty velvet box. "Marcus," I said, my voice soft. He grunted in response. "I know you've been so stressed," I said. walking toward him. I wanted you to have something, a reminder. He finally looked up, annoyed by the interruption. I presented the empty box. I put it on your desk, at the office. I dropped it off yesterday. I was in the neighborhood. A clumsy domestic lie. What he said? A pen, a really nice one. I know you've wanted one. I smiled, the practiced, gentle smile of the wife. Just something to remind you of us, while you're there. A flicker of confusion, then annoyance, then, finally, patronizing acceptance. He was being placated by the simple-minded wife. A pen. Right. Thanks, Sloan. I'll look for it. He turned back to his phone. He didn't find it, because when he got to his office, he didn't look. That afternoon, he put it in his suit jacket pocket. The 48 hours that followed were the longest of my life. I was a functioning, smiling, perfect mother. I took Leo to the park. I made dinners. I hosted a small impromptu coffee morning for 2 other moms. And all the while, I was visualizing that tiny microphone. Was he in a meeting? Was he on the phone? Was he alone? Was he with her? I lived with the constant humming vibration of anxiety. I had to get it back before the battery died. Saturday. My alibi was perfect, a spa day and shopping. I told Marcus I needed the whole day. He was relieved to have me gone. I drove downtown, but I didn't go to the spa. I went to the office. The building was quiet, but not empty. Weekend workers. I was just another one. I let myself into his office. The pen cup was still there, the cheap Bics, but the silver pen was gone. My heart hammered. He'd lost it. He'd thrown it out. No. I breathed. I thought like him. He wouldn't leave a $2,000 pen in a cup. He was a showman. I looked at his suit jacket, slung over the back of his chair. I walked over. I slipped my hand into the inside pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold, familiar metal. He had just left it there, forgotten. I retrieved the live pen. I reached into my purse, pulled out its identical clean twin, the one I had bought as a replacement, and slipped it into his pocket. The perfect swap. I didn't wait. I went to the garage. I sat in my SUV, the engine off, the silence of the concrete tomb enveloping me. I pulled the pen apart, retrieving the tiny microdrive. I plugged it into an adapter for my phone. I put in my earbuds. I pressed play. At first, it was just noise, the rustle of paper, the sound of him typing, a long, boring conference call about quarterly projections, and then the sound of the office door closing, a woman's voice, low, laughing. You really think no one heard that call? You sounded like a god. They hear what I want them to hear, Marcus replied, his voice thick with the arrogance she fed him. I heard the clink of glass, the champagne flute. I heard a kiss. I fast-forwarded, my stomach churning. I stopped when I heard her voice change. It was no longer flirting. It was business. So, this Scion memo, she said, her voice casual. It's really as big as you said. And then I heard it, the sound that sealed his fate. I heard my husband laugh. Big Kira, it's the whole goddamn kingdom. There was a rustle of paper. He had the hard copy. A document so sensitive it was supposed to be kept in a biometric safe. Just listen to these numbers, he said, his voice brimming with pride, trying to impress the analyst he was sleeping with. The preliminary valuation on the Silverleaf patents. We're acquiring them for 10% of their projected 5-year value. They're valued at $200 million. We're getting them for 20. And this part, he read. He read it all. He read the timelines. He read the secret code names for the shell companies we were using. He read, aloud, every single piece of data that confirmed Aurelian was engaged in a hostile, criminally undervalued takeover. It was no longer just insider trading. It was a recorded confession. I pulled the earbud out. I sat in the silent, dark garage. The texts were bad. This was a corporate death warrant, and Marcus had just signed it with his own stupid, bragging voice. I spent Sunday night in my home office, the door locked. Leo was asleep. Marcus was in the living room, watching a game, oblivious. I was not a wife. I was not a mother. I was a prosecutor building a case, on my laptop. I had 3 separate encrypted files. One, the data from the Concur portal, the spreadsheets of his client entertainment, the luxury hotels, the proof that Kira Ryland was a ghost on the payroll, funded by the company credit card. 2, the high-resolution photographs of his phone, the text messages, the confirmation of the Silverleaf takeover, the insider trading felony. 3, the audio file from the pen, the voice-activated recording, the full, bragging, verbal confession of securities fraud. I had him. I had the what, the how, and the who. But where did it go? I couldn't send it to the CEO. Richard Shaw was Marcus's oldest friend. They had come up together. They played golf together. Their families vacationed together. Richard would see this package, and his first call would be to Marcus. He would bury it. The evidence would disappear, and I would become the enemy. I couldn't send it to the general counsel. He was weak. He answered to Marcus. I needed someone who answered to no one. Someone who feared nothing except a bad balance sheet and an SEC investigation. And then, the name came to me, like a shard of ice. Diana Vance. Mrs. Vance. She was the independent board member, the one all the other executives were terrified of. She was a former federal prosecutor who now ran the entire audit committee. I remembered her from my time at Aurelian. She had grilled me, personally, for 3 hours during a board review of my compliance protocols. She was iron gray, her eyes missing any hint of sentiment. She was a woman who didn't care about friendships. She cared about liability. Diana Vance would not bury this. She would see it as a cancer, and she would cut it out before it spread. I went to my desk. I took out a brand new 8-gigabyte USB drive, still in its plastic blister pack. I put on latex gloves, a ridiculous theatrical touch I'd gotten from a movie. But it made me feel better. I wiped the drive clean, then formatted it. Twice. I created 3 folders on the blank drive. Folder 1, Financial Violations inside. I placed the expense reports. Folder 2, Legal Risk Exposure. Inside, the photographs of the text messages. Folder 3, Audio Evidence and Thorn. Inside, the full, unedited MP3 file from the pen. I stared at the screen. It was perfect. It was a clean, undeniable package of his self-destruction. But something was missing. This package destroyed Marcus. It didn't do anything for me. I opened my old cloud backup, a drive I hadn't accessed in 5 years. I went to a folder labeled Aurelian Memos Archive. I found it, dated 4 years ago. To Marcus Thorne, Richard Shaw, CEO, CTO, from Sloan Hendricks, Head of Compliance. Subject critical vulnerability, terminated employee access and non-vetted hiring protocols. I read my own words, a ghost from my former life. I warned them that the current system of disabling rather than scrubbing accounts left the company exposed. I warned them that the fast-track hiring process for analysts without a full background check, a process Marcus had created, was a gateway for corporate espionage. My memo, the one they had ignored, the one Richard Shaw had called paranoid in a follow-up email, which Marcus had condescendingly shown me. I saved the file. I created a 4th folder on the USB drive. I named it Prior Notification Ignored. I dragged the memo and the email chain into the folder. Now, it was perfect. This wasn't just an employee gone rogue. This was a catastrophic failure of leadership, one I had tried to prevent. I ejected the drive. I placed it in a small, padded envelope. No note, no explanation. The files spoke for themselves. The next morning, Monday, I drove Leo to school, but I didn't drive home. I drove 40 miles north, to Boulder. I found a Kinko's in a strip mall. I paid in cash, a $20 bill for a $9 overnight shipment. I told the clerk to keep the change. The address was not Aurelian Tower. It was the private address of Diana Vance's personal holding company in the Denver Tech Center. A place she would be, a place her secretary wouldn't be screening. I wrote the return address as a random law firm I'd seen on a billboard near the highway. I placed the envelope in the FedEx bin. I walked out into the bright Colorado sunshine. I had just dropped a bomb. It would take approximately 18 hours for it to land. I had planted the seed. All I had to do now was wait for the tree to fall. 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 72 hours of silence. It was the most terrifying, gut-wrenching sound I had ever heard. I had launched a missile, and I had no idea if it had hit its target or simply vanished into the void. I went through the motions of my life. I made Leo's lunches. I read him bedtime stories. I smiled at Marcus when he left in the morning, and I smiled when he came home at night, reeking of that same floral perfume. Only now it was mixed with the sharp, acidic tang of his own sweat and fear. Something was wrong. He was jumpy. He was on his phone constantly, not with Kira, but with other executives. His voice a low, angry hiss. I waited. On Thursday night at 10 p.m., the front door slammed open. It wasn't a civilized entrance. It was a violent, panicked burst. I was in the living room, ostensibly reading a book. Marcus stumbled into the entryway. His face was a waxy, pale gray. His tie was ripped loose, his top button undone. He looked like he had run all the way from downtown. He didn't even see me. He just threw his briefcase. It skidded across the polished concrete floor and slammed into the steel leg of our dining table with a crash. "They know," he whispered. It was a choked, breathless sound. "They know. God. They know." I put my book down, my face a carefully constructed mask of wifely concern. I stood up slowly. "Marcus, what's wrong? You're scaring me." "Know what?" "Honey." He finally focused on me, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Project Scion," he breathed. "The whole thing. It's gone. It's all gone." "What are you talking about?" I walked toward him, my hands clasped in front of me. "There's a leak, a massive leak. Adriana Pace." He spat the name out like poison. "An article just dropped, not an hour ago. It's everywhere. The Financial Times, Bloomberg, the Journal. She blew up the whole merger." He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He pulled up an article and shoved the screen in my face. The headline was brutal. "Aurelian's House of Cards inside the plot to seize Silverleaf." I took the phone from his trembling hand, my own perfectly steady. I pretended to read it, my eyes scanning the words I already knew were coming. Adriana's story was a masterpiece. It had everything: the secret code name, the undervalued assets, the shell companies. It didn't cite sources. It didn't need to. It was written with the absolute authority of someone who had seen the memos. "It's a disaster," Marcus was muttering, pacing the living room, his hands clawing at his hair. "Silverleaf's stock skyrocketed. It's up over 60% in after-hours trading. The deal is dead. We're exposed. Somebody made millions on the leak." "Oh, Marcus," I said, my voice full of fake shock. "That's horrible. Who could have done this?" "Vance," he spat. "That witch. She called an emergency board meeting for 7 a.m. tomorrow. She's already hired an outside law firm. Not our guys. Some cutthroat firm from D.C. They're launching a full investigation. They're freezing everything. Our hard drives, our email, everything." He stopped pacing. He stared at me. The panic was receding, being replaced by a cold, desperate calculation. He was looking for a life raft. "They're looking at everyone," he said, his voice quiet. "Everyone who ever touched Scion." He took a step toward me. "But the weird thing is..." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing, and for a second I thought he knew. "They're looking at you. Sloane." I held my breath. I let my face register the perfect, calculated beat of stunned confusion. "Me." I laughed. A short, nervous, disbelieving sound. Marcus, what are you talking about? I don't even work there. I haven't been in that building in 5 years. I know, he snapped, his voice cracking. I told them that, but they said, the investigators, they said the initial security sweep showed a high-level data breach, and they said, Sloan, they said someone used your old security card. He wasn't accusing me. He was terrified. He was looking for an angle, a narrative. He was looking for a scapegoat. He grabbed my arms. His grip was too tight, his panic rolling off him in waves. They think it was you. They think you, as a disgruntled ex-employee, found some way to get in. They think you're the leak. That's the story they're starting to build. I stared at him, my mind working faster than it ever had in my life. This was the twist. This was the move I hadn't anticipated. Diana Vance. She was smarter than I thought. She wasn't just investigating Marcus. She was investigating the breach. And my old, ghostly card had left a single, electronic fingerprint. But Marcus, in his terror, had just handed me the perfect defense. He had given me the script. A disgruntled employee, I repeated, letting my voice shake. They think I did this to you. I don't know what they think, he yelled, but it's a way out. For us. I pulled away from him. Marcus, that's insane. I'm a stay-at-home mom. What am I going to do? Hack a server from my SUV? It's impossible. Exactly, he said, seizing on it. It's the perfect defense. But we have to be smart. I had to play this perfectly. I had to let him lead me to the next move. I looked at him, the picture of a man who had just seen his entire future evaporate. His panic was a physical thing, stinking up my clean, minimalist living room. Marcus, I said, my voice deliberately calm, measured. I was the reasonable one. Are you really suggesting what? Put on a catsuit and repelled into your office? That's insane. I don't know. Sloan, I'm just telling you what they're saying. Then tell them to prove it, I said, my voice hardening. I walked past him, put my book down on the counter. Call them. Call Gary, your head of security. Call him right now. He stared at me, confused. What? Call him. Tell him to pull the camera footage from the executive garage. Tell him to pull the elevator logs. They are all time-stamped. They will show I was not there. They will show I have been here, in this house, being the nothing you say I am. Hope flashed in his eyes, a way out, a scapegoat he could clear to prove his own innocence. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb shaking so hard he misdialed twice. Finally, he got the number. Gary, it's Marcus. I'm with Sloan. He paused, listening to the squawk on the other end. Yes, I know what time it is. Listen to me. The investigators. This whole thing about Sloan. It's impossible. I need you to pull the logs. Right now. I need you to confirm her card was not used. He stabbed the speakerphone button on the counter. A bead of sweat dripping from his hairline onto the white marble. The tinny, exhausted voice of Gary, the security chief, filled the room. Marcus, you need to stop talking. The outside counsel has frozen all access. I can't. Damn it, Gary, Marcus roared, a flash of his old CEO self. They are trying to pin this on my wife. Just check the access log. Was her badge used, yes or no? There was a long sigh, the sound of rapid, angry typing. The silence in the room was so heavy I could feel it pressing on my skin. Marcus was breathing through his mouth. Okay, Gary said finally. I'm in the main security frame. Okay. No. Her card. Hendricks. Sloan. It wasn't used. The logs show one single ping at the garage reader 3 days ago, but it was a access denied. It never entered the building. It's not the source of the breach. You're clear. Marcus almost collapsed in relief, a huge, shuddering breath rattling his chest. See? He gasped, looking at me. See, I told you. It's not you. It's a mistake. But Marcus, Gary's voice continued, and the relief on my husband's face froze, then shattered. Her card isn't the problem. Yours is. What? Marcus whispered. I'm looking at the logs right now, Gary said, his voice turning official. Cold. He was reading from a script for the investigators. Your card, Marcus. Your credentials. They were used to access the executive garage and the 30th floor elevator bank. The first time was last Tuesday, at 2:17 in the morning. The second time was Sunday, at 3:04 a.m. I had, of course, used my own card for the first reconnaissance, just to test the system, but for the real trips, the one to plant the pen, the one to retrieve it, I had used his. I had plucked it from his wallet as he snored his whiskey-soaked sleep and returned it before dawn. He was so arrogant. He never even checked. Marcus's face was a mask of pure, bloodless horror. Gary, that's impossible, he stammered. I was at home. I was asleep. Sloan. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Tell him, I was here. I was in bed. I simply stared at him. I gave him nothing. That's a system error, Marcus yelled into the phone. It has to be. The system is fine, Marcus, Gary said flatly. The logs are clean. You were in the building. I have to go. The investigators are here. The line clicked dead. Marcus stared at the phone. He was hyperventilating, his mind racing, trying to form an alibi he didn't have. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't say he was asleep, because his card was there. He couldn't say he was with a woman, because he was just not the one he was supposed to be with, as if summoned by the devil himself. His phone rang. The screen lit up the dark kitchen. Diana Vance. He looked at the name, then at me. It was a look of pure, primal terror. He didn't move. The phone rang again, a piercing, demanding shriek. Well, I said, crossing my arms. She doesn't like to be kept waiting. His hand shook as he answered. He put it on speaker. A desperate, last-second move to keep me as a witness, an ally. Diana. He breathed. Marcus. Her voice was not a voice. It was a verdict. Cold, sharp, and final. I am looking at a series of expense reports you submitted. They are fascinating. Who is Kira Ryland? Marcus opened his mouth. No sound came out. He's an analyst. He finally managed, his voice cracking. A strategy analyst. Really? Diana's voice was poison. That's funny, because there is no W-2 for Akira Ryland. There is no payroll record. There is, however, a digital trail, a trail of you, Marcus, personally overriding all security protocols to grant a temporary employee C-suite level access 5 months ago, an employee with no background check, an employee who, it seems, does not exist. Diana, I can explain. It was a special project. Was it? She countered. Does your special project also include a $12,000 charge for the Amangiri Resort, or $7,000 at the Four Seasons in Vail, or the necklace from a jeweler in Cherry Creek? You've been funding a ghost with company money. Marcus, you didn't just have an affair. You invited a corporate spy into our house, gave her your keys, and paid for her hotel room while she robbed us blind. He slid down the kitchen island, his legs giving out. He was on the floor. He realized it. He had been set up from every possible angle. By Adriana, the journalist who played him, and now by the company, who needed a head on a pike. He looked up at me from the floor, the phone clattering from his hand. He was broken. The great, powerful CEO. He was a child. He was nothing. He crawled the last few feet, his hands grabbing the hem of my pants. Sloan, he begged, his voice a wet, pathetic rasp. Sloan, please, you have to help me. They're going to put all of it on me. The SEC, the leak, all of it. I looked down at him, my face a mask of cold porcelain. You know the protocols, Sloan, he cried, his fingers tightening. You wrote them. You can talk to Vance. You can explain the system. Tell them it was a flaw. Tell them it was a technical error. Please. Sloan, they'll listen to you. He was weeping. The great man, the CEO, the titan of industry, was a sobbing wreck on our multi-million-dollar floor, clinging to my pants like a toddler. If I lose this job, we lose everything, he wailed, his voice thick with snot and self-pity. The house, Sloan, the cars, the club. Your entire life you'll have nothing. He tugged at my hand, his eyes wild, desperate, and hateful. He saw it. He saw the cold, clear void in my expression. He saw that I was not his ally. He scrambled to his knees, his face contorted in a last pathetic snarl of dominance. You're nothing without me, Sloan, he screamed, his voice cracking. Nothing. Do you hear me? Remember that. And I smiled. It was the first real, genuine, bone-deep smile I had felt in 5 years. It started slow, a cold pull at the corners of my mouth, and then it spread, a warmth that filled my entire chest. The vacuum was gone. You're right, Marcus, I said, my voice as clear and hard as a diamond. I am nothing without you. I pulled my hand from his grasp. I stepped over his trembling body as if he were just another one of Leo's discarded toys on the floor. I walked up the floating glass staircase. I went into our master bedroom, to the walk-in closet that was the size of a studio apartment. I walked past my rows of cashmere sweaters and yoga pants. I went to the very back, to a garment bag I had not unzipped since the day Leo was born. I pulled it open. My old armor, a dark, charcoal gray suit, a silk shell. I laid them on the bed. I stripped off my pajamas, my soft clothes. I put on the suit. The fabric felt crisp, unfamiliar, and powerful. I put on the low-heeled pumps, the ones that made the quiet, dangerous click on a hard floor. I put my hair up into a tight, severe twist. I looked in the mirror. The wife was gone. Sloan Hendricks, head of compliance, was staring back. I walked back downstairs. Marcus was still on the floor, a crumpled, defeated heap. He looked up as I descended the stairs, my heels clicking on the steel. His face was a mask of utter confusion. What are you doing? He stammered. Where are you going, Sloan? You have to help me. I walked to the front door. I picked up my car keys from the bowl. I'm going to work, I said. I didn't look back. I got in my SUV, the mom car, and I drove downtown. But this time, I didn't go to the garage. I pulled up to the front entrance of Aurelian Tower. It was 6:30 in the morning. As I stepped out of the car, Gary, the head of security, was standing there. He wasn't in his usual uniform. He was in a suit. He looked terrified. He just nodded at me. Mrs. Thorne. Ma'am, he said. They're waiting for you. It's Ms. Hendricks, I said. He didn't question it. He led me through the lobby, swiping his own card. We rode the executive elevator in silence. My old card was still in my pocket, but I didn't need it. The doors opened on the 40th floor. The conference room was lit. Through the glass walls, I could see them. A team of lawyers I didn't recognize, all in dark suits. And at the head of the massive granite table, sitting perfectly still, was Diana Vance. She watched me approach. Gary opened the door for me. Diana stood up. She was the only one. Ms. Hendricks, she said, her voice a flat iron bar. Your package was comprehensive. The audio file was particularly illuminating. I'm sure it was, I said, my voice matching hers. The board has been in an emergency session all night, she said. We have voted unanimously to terminate Marcus Thorne for cause, effective immediately. She paused, her eyes searching mine. Your fourth file was the most interesting part. This was the final twist, the real one. My fourth folder, the one labeled Prior Notification Ignored, had not just contained the memo. It had contained a second file, a file I had created on Sunday night. It was a single-page document, It was not a request. It was a proposal. It read, "Marcus Thorne has created a catastrophic compliance and liability failure. I am the only person who understands the full scope of the breach and the internal protocols well enough to clean it up. His termination is non-negotiable. My reinstatement is also non-negotiable. I will return as Chief Compliance Officer, with the full authority and compensation package of the CEO, on a 3-year contract. My first act will be a full independent audit of the entire C-suite." Diana Vance stared at me. She hadn't become a powerhouse by being sentimental. She respected only one thing: leverage. She gestured to the hallway, toward the corner office. "The cleaners have just finished. It's yours, Ms. Hendricks. Welcome back." I didn't smile. I just nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance." I walked out of the conference room. I walked past the sea of cubicles, dark and quiet. I walked to the double wooden doors. My old key, the physical one, was still in my pocket. I didn't need it. The door was unlocked. I walked into his office. My office. The smell of his cologne was gone. It just smelled like cleaning chemicals. The city of Denver was spread out before me, the sun just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I sat down in his chair, the high-backed black leather CEO chair. It was still warm. I put my purse on the desk. I took out my phone. I opened my text messages. I scrolled to Marcus. I took a photo. A picture of my feet, in my power suit pumps, propped up on the massive oak desk. In the corner of the frame, resting in the ceramic cup, was the sterling silver pen. I typed one single line of text. I hit send. "Thanks for keeping my seat warm. Oh, and my lawyer will be in touch about Leo. Thank you so much for listening to my story." I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Please drop a comment below. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.